Microphone. My name is Sonia Alterman. I'm chief editor of the magazine Strelka Mag, and I was invited here to moderate this session, which is called the New City Centers and Development of Public Spaces, probably because our building for 5 years in one of those which concentrates on the development of our cities, on the new environments, on the post-Soviet environments, and its adaptation to our new realities. My colleagues are great. Gil Peñalosa, founder and chair of chair of 80 years, Ambassador World Urban Parks. Let's welcome him. Alexander Washburn, the former chief urban designer of NYC, the principal of Draw Brooklyn. And Vitaly Manuilov, Deputy General Director of VDNH, the Exhibition Center. So today, our session will be as follows. I will give all the speakers several minutes to speak how they see the social environment today, and I'll ask several questions. Unfortunately, we don't have much time for Q&A session, but I hope that our discussion will be maximum useful. Gil, the floor is yours.
I think cities are fascinating because now more and more that's where we live. And not only where we live, but where more and more people are going to live. Today we have about 3.5 billion people living in cities. Within the lifetime of our children, which is nothing, within the lifetime of our children, we're going to double to 7 billion. So all of the cities that we have done in the history of humanity, we're going to have to do the same in the next 40 years, which could be a fantastic opportunity if we do it right. If that is going to happen in the next 40 years, maybe we should think, what have we done in the last 40? Because if what we've been doing is good, let's just do more of the same. Unfortunately, in the last 40 years, the overwhelming majority is horrible. The overwhelming majority is not environmentally sustainable, and that's how we are, like we are in climate change. It's not good for physical health, it's not good for mental health, it's not even good for economic development. That means that we will need to do cities radically different. And by the way, this increase in cities, this increasing population around the world, all of it is going to be in cities. So cities are going to continue to grow. And the cities have been bad is not because they are cities. The cities could be magnificent places. That's why people move to cities. Because when people are living in cities, it's easier to provide services, to provide good public health, to provide good education, to provide good jobs. So the thing is that we need to do things a little bit different. I mean, we've been focusing so much on car, and not on people's happiness. And that's what the main reason, the main destroyer of cities. We've been doing cities for thousands of years, but in the last 100, we've been focusing more on the car than on people's happiness. I am the founder and chair of an organization that is called 880 Cities. 880 Cities has a simple but powerful concept. Is what if everything we did in our city, the sidewalk, the crosswalk, the park, the library, the school, the businesses, everything had to be great for an 8-year-old and for an 80-year-old. It's not 8 it's 8 and 80 as an indicator species. Because if the city is good for the 8 and it's good for the 80, it's going to be good for everybody, from 0 to over 100. The reality is that we've been building cities as if everybody was 30-year-old and athletic, and we got to create cities that are good for all. The last thing, the point that I want to mention is that we need to care in cities about the most vulnerable people. For example, the children. We have known for the last 50 or 60 years that the most important years of the life of a human being are the first 5 years. But when you visit parks, there is almost nothing to do for a child that is 0 to 5. Actually, in most cities, we have better parks for dogs dog parks than for children 0 to 5. It seems like we knew more what makes dogs happy than what makes children 0 to 5 happy. And the other segment that I want you to think about is the older people. We're living longer, not longer, much, much, much longer. You know, in Moscow and around the world, you know, 150 years ago, we didn't have any country in the world with a life expectancy above 45. So many of us would be dead by now. Now we don't have any country with a life expectancy below 45. Russia has doubled the life expectancy in the last 150 years. So, but nevertheless, it seems like we're not used to. I think one of the biggest waste of resource that we have in the world is the people, the older people. People retired and we cross them out as if they had died, except that they got 20, 30, 40 years left, and they have knowledge and they have experience and they are wealthier and healthier and they could do so many things. So when we do cities, this is the last comment. Let's not think of cities as the Disney World park for the 20 to 50. Cities are good only if they're good for everybody, including the 0 to 5, including the people over 60, including the poor people, the people with disabilities, the people with racial minorities, ethnic minorities. And I just think that this is a magnificent opportunity that we have in the future to do things right. It's not only about just doing the things right, but it's also about doing the right things. Thank you.
Гил, спасибо большое.
Yes, thank you so much, Gil. I would like to ask you a question. We're here in Zaryadye, one of the most successful social spaces. How do you assess it? Do you think it is equally accessible to those who is 8 and who is 80? So Zaryadye Park here, right? Is it equally accessible to those who are 8 and who are 80? Is it accessible for all? Yeah?
I think that when you look at the park, there are very few children. There is not that much for them to do. And also older people. By the way, it's not only about the hardware, but it's also the software. It's not the number one activity in parks all over the world. The number one is walking. So every park, small, medium, large, should have walking path. But it's not only about doing the walking path. It's about organizing walking groups. For example, loneliness. Loneliness is a huge crisis around the world. People are lonely even living with millions around. And you say, oh, but I see people walking. No, you see the few that are walking. You don't see the many that are not. So we should organize in the parks walking groups, knitting groups. One of the fastest growing activity in parks in America are knitting groups. People could knit at home. They go because that's an excuse to socialize. So I think something that could be improved in Moscow, and I've seen parks in Tatarstan and in St. Petersburg and in Moscow, is the management around uses and activities. Not only the hardware, but let's make sure that we have the software. When we put 4 walls and a roof, and we call it community center, we say, oh, we need management. We need to get the schools using it. We need the seniors group, the faith groups. But we do the parks, and we think that the park is going to take care of itself. No, the parks need almost as much management as a community center. It should be almost like we should think of parks almost as an outdoor community center.
Thank you, Gil. Я передаю слово Александросу.
Thank you so much, Gil. I would like to give the floor to Alexandros Voshbor.
So much. How many of you here want to change something about your city? Okay, I have more and more hands, right? That's why we're interested in urban design, because urban design is a tool of changing cities. I'm going to show you how to change a city a little bit here, give you a quick example. All right, I'll start with one called the High Line. It was a project that we did in New York City that was an old rail line built in the 1930s that had been abandoned. And a group of speculators of land bought the land underneath it and lobbied the government to tear it down so they could build 5-story buildings. They almost succeeded, but we formed a community group and stopped them, and instead asked how we could use the High Line to transform the neighborhood, how we could build a public space that would have an effect much larger than the park itself. and it had very many important urban goals, such as creating new housing, such as creating mixed use. But how does a park do such things? Well, it does it by being a small part of a larger district, and the larger district is designed. So the High Line as a project is actually called the West Chelsea Special District. Here it is, the map of Manhattan, the definition and the zoning. The zoning, as you can see, is primarily manufacturing with a little bit of mixed use in the middle. We had to change the neighborhood by changing the zoning. The people who owned the land under the High Line were opposed and had stopped the project in its tracks until we figured out a way of making them happy. We allowed them to transfer their development rights. The building they could have built if they tore down the High Line would now go to the top of new buildings in the rezoned West Chelsea district. Every building in this district, every piece of land we thought about, we drew. We tried to figure out what it should feel like when it would be built by the private sector. But we were the public sector thinking ahead. Therefore, we created what were called bulk envelopes. Some of them pretty complicated, but their primary goal was to improve the setting of the park so that when a private building was built, the public park would be improved, not hurt. Here's an example. The High Line, of course, was built. So the air rights, for instance, this piece at 23rd Street, were transferred to the top of this building by Jean Nouvel on 10th Avenue. This resulted in several things: new buildings on the perimeter, new buildings near the High Line, and then, of course, the money that was allowing the High Line to be built itself. Interesting, the economics, and this is the primary instruction. 100 million of public money went into the High Line Park. $3 billion was generated in private money to build out the area around it. So a small amount of public money was magnified. That caused it to happen. You know, my mentor taught me that nothing happens in the city unless you can unify policy, money, and design. All three of those have to work together. The rezoning was the policy, this was the money, and the design was the thought that went into it before it became law. Now, something that is also a characteristic of an urban design project is momentum, is follow-on effect. What is just above the High Line? Well, it's an area called Hudson Yards that was just a sketch 15 years ago. This is to the north where the High Line ends around the rail yards, which is a very disused area with nobody living on it, and for which we planned an extension of the city called the Western Rail Yards and Hudson Boulevard. Now today, this is a reality. If you've been to New York within the last 2 months, Hudson Yards has just opened. It's the most expensive development in New York City history. It's $25 billion. Now the public paid $1 billion to create a platform over the train yards so that it could be built on. The result is iconic. Now, some people think the architecture is too modern, let's say. The buildings are too big. But the bottom line lesson is that a public investment of $1 billion was able to create a private investment of $25 billion. And this was following the effect of the High Line, whose investment of $100 million created $3 billion. Very elegant, very powerful, because money causes repetition, money causes things to change. But how can we use it now in other situations? How can a small park change a city? I'm just asking you to think about this, that any project, however small, has a public purpose beyond its own space of a park. It should be used as a trigger to change a larger area. In New York, my neighborhood was flooded by Hurricane Sandy. We need to change. We need to build seawalls, let's say. We need to build protections from the next hurricane. How will we afford it? I think the answer is to use the same strategy that the High Line did, to invest in a public park, in this case, a park on the waterfront, that acts as a seawall, and behind it, transform the neighborhood so that the government policy will begin with an initial public investment and will be followed by a private investment, which is, however, for a public purpose. That's the key to it. If you can think ahead and design the public purpose into the private investment, that is how you will transform your city, and that is how you will meet whatever challenge is coming ahead. We don't know, frankly, what the next challenge will be, but cities have a way of overcoming. And I've just outlined for you the basis, the mechanics of that success. Thank you.
Спасибо за вдохновляющий спич. Александрос, у меня к вам вопрос.
Alexandros, I've got a question for you. So climate change is going on. How would you evaluate whether public spaces today are ready for the climate change and for the rise of the ocean level? How would you estimate that?
You'd estimate they're completely unprepared for it. Completely. 100%.
So what do we have to do? Do we have any mechanism of how we can resolve the issue step by step already now?
The science is getting clearer and clearer. It's simply weather forecasting combined with hydrodynamics. We have computer models that will tell you the likelihood, the height, the location. It's probabilistic, but it's what you would use as a basis for your plan. The point is, you have to plan in a totality in order to protect specifically. That's very hard for government to do. Holland, the Netherlands, there are many people here from the Netherlands, they're great at it. They're able at a federal level to protect their coasts, and that allows Amsterdam to remain so cute. The US were not so good. We tend to rely and say, oh, you fix your own house, you fix your own building, and we don't care about the public space. That's an American failing. I'm hoping that seeing the success of the High Line, the Hudson Yards, which are very capitalist and very American, that people will see how you can say, okay, we are going to take this waterfall of money, but it is going to go to a public purpose, which is to create public space that protects the city. Every park becomes integral to a strategy of climate adaptation. If we can do that, we are both creating a park for public space and public trust and public enjoyment, but solving our really most fundamental infrastructure problem into this century.
Thank you very much. Я бы хотела передать микрофон Виталию.
Now I would like to hand it over to Vitaly Emanuilov, Deputy General Director of probably the largest public space in Moscow, VDNK. Please let us know how you try to transform this public space. We have a brief presentation. First of all, I would like to thank you as a moderator and all our organizers that allowed us to show once again to the public what is VDNK. And the next slide is actually an invitation to our 80th anniversary. We will be celebrating it this year from the 1st to the 4th of August this year. We will have some unique concerts and some very exciting events. In 2013, we started the transfer process from federal structures to city structures, and the patron was our president himself, and that was for great help that the mayor of Moscow spends time on our park. He regularly visits it and listens to us and takes part in some projects. So back in 2016, we split the park in 7 theme zones. One of them is the territory of Ostankino part, which recently joined VDNK, and historically they were one single forest. So let's begin with this central alley where we have the main arc and the main museums, and also the landscape is important. I should mention that for many years VDNK is a free entrance territory and we are open 24/7, and now we opened the last festival and we had so much more visitors that after our reconstruction, when we try to reproduce the image of 1956, so when we opened the new pitch, so it only lasted for 2 weeks. So this is a big load on our park. Yeah, so the next theme zone is the science park. Again, the president visited, and we united 300 of educational program, unique master classes hosted by people from Russia and abroad, and the very process of business management that we can begin from here. The next territory, just 1 second, like the craftsmanship park, where we have over 350,000 unique visitors per year and 32 theme events and landmarks, and we have visitors including children from the age of 3 and retired people. So we have individual programs for those who want to start a hobby as a craftsman, and also for those who are retired and want to pick up a hobby. So our master classes are based on wishes of our visitors in order to cater for their needs. The next theme zone, which makes us proud, is our landscape park. At the moment we have above 11,000 new trees. 1,000 of them belong to unique species. So we haven't finished the restoration, but very shortly we'll have an attraction site where it would be possible to go underneath the tree crown and have a look at the oak tree wood. And it was difficult to get all the permits and licenses from the city authorities. Yes, but we have this intellectual nature of this area. And also we plan to start building our 5 senses garden. It's like a Möbius band. I think most urbanists know what it is. So we still want this to become an expectation. So this is a photo from our landscape park, the new green zones, so with the walking path. So the expo area within K is called an exposition center, but the expo area is the smallest one. And this year we plan to begin the large-scale retrostructuring. It will be a state-of-the-art hotel and expo complex with areas for loading and offloading. And we have parking lots, but we would like to have more of them, and I hope that an underground parking for 2,000 cars will improve the comfort level. So it doesn't appear to be a big problem for the scale of the VD and K, but the traffic we have on the weekends, on Saturdays and Sundays, makes us think that we would like to improve comfort. And we also try to manage our traffic flows. Well, so this is the so-called Montreal's pavilion, Pavilion 70, which is well known because it was transferred from Canada, from Montreal. So it was assembled for 10 years. So, and we had two Tupolev 144 plane exposed there, and shortly it will be awarded the status of a monument, and we plan to put a modern concert hall there with separate halls for smaller scale concert. And we also have another center in a side. We realize this site is fragile, and this glass perimeter is a point of big concern for us. Also, another area which is under reconstruction is our attraction site park, where foreign architects, mainly from Europe, worked, our well-known colleagues, and we plan that this area will attract about 2 million visitors per year, and 4 of the attractions are being assembled in Europe. Most of them are interactive, and they will be for the first time brought into Russia. I should also say that apart from the park of attraction site, we will have a rope way, the cable car way. So there were a lot of debates about the project, but many experts believe that it will make the territory more exciting, because the territory, together with the adjacent areas, covers more than 350 hectares. So many of our experts and developers believed it would be interesting to have a look over the territory. And we will have like an observation wheel for 150 meters high. And it was difficult to find the location for it, but I hope our residents and visitors like it. And I hope it becomes another point of attraction. In modern conditions, internet provides us with unique opportunities on how we can manage our park. Our observations showed that actually people from different age groups, different families come for roller skating to VDNK. We are not the only territory, but sometimes we have groups of 500 people who would come to our park. They drink and eat little, but after we started to investigate the story, we realized that they love our spaces, our environment, that this is a possibility to go for a distance of 10 kilometers on a good surface, and realized that they needed special storage areas, that they have social like groups on social media. And according to our research, we need to improve conditions for different social and even gender-based group. So this is an interactive model which would allow us to offer most of population and most of our guests what they want. Thank you. Thank you, Vitaly. A question to you. So VDNK Park is a unique combination of the cultural heritage, and I would like to ask, what would you recommend to many others? Many Soviet parks have certain pavilions and buildings which can be seen as cultural heritage. How do you combine cultural heritage in a modern park with new technologies, and how do you manage to do this in VDNK? Well, actually, not only our buildings and structures are part of cultural heritage, but also the territory and the landscape itself. And sometimes it's difficult for us to apply modern technology, even when we are trying to install like the trash bins and benches. But luckily, some of our 8 pavilions used to be buildings which reflected life of our Soviet republics. So now they were transferred to certain independent republics like Armenia and Azerbaijan, where together with these republics we are renovating some of the buildings, and they offer ethnic products, ethnic food, and some other products, and they have like travel offices which happen to offer some extra services to foreign tourists. With other pavilions which have the monument status, we are working very carefully using the same electronic technologies. We are trying to explain what's the interior. It's not always possible to put a banner or a billboard on a pavilion, but it helps us. Well, the very spirit of the territory and the historical memory of visitors and guests helps us very much. Thank you. Let's clap our hands. Let's applause to our speakers. I have a number of generic questions. My first question is, it has been proven and will have accepted as an that it's not possible to design public spaces without involvement of residents. And I would like to ask our foreign guests, as experts, which consult other public spaces a lot, what is the trend? Both of you have more than 10 years of experience. How could you characterize what's changing in the demands of residents and visitors? Or, well, are there changes, or maybe the trends are stable?
Just to clarify the question, are there changes in the way people are using public space in the last 10 years?
Changing of request from audience, from users.
Two aspects. Yes, there is a little bit of a change in what the users are asking, but also in how they're asking. We're finding that more and more people are coming to public parks as extensions of their living rooms. Now, the High Line is a little different. It's so popular that it's just, you can't even walk there anymore. It's an international sensation. But there are many other parks in New York. For instance, Brooklyn Bridge Park, which is one of my favorites, or Valentino Pier, which is in my neighborhood. And people are using them as outdoor living rooms to meet with their friends, to cook, literally to cook, to watch movies. It's extraordinary. And it's also serves a very important purpose. And I like to say that public space builds public trust. You know, because in New York, where you have people from so many diverse backgrounds, rich, poor, African Americans, Asians, Europeans, everyone is there, and everybody wants to be outside at the same time. And in the parks of New York, especially Brooklyn Bridge Park, when you come on a Friday afternoon and you see the interaction of all these people from diverse backgrounds respecting each other. And I mean, in pretty, teenagers, and this is, you would not think this, but everyone is behaving in a way that accommodates the other person. This is such a fundamental civic lesson. Public space builds public trust. You break down barriers, you create social cohesion. I like to say that our parks are really the way that we have resilience, because we've built our social resilience through our cohesion. So, to answer your question through that, what it means, I think, is that people are asking not so much to be entertained by their park, but to be in an open area, different from their home, in a way that they can be comfortable. To be comfortable means that you have to be able to interact with others. So, this is a different message from Hudson Yards. Hudson Yards has a commercial message. It's an Instagrammable place. So you see on the one end, the super capitalist places are going to, where do I take my selfie? You know, same thing in Singapore, same thing in Hudson Yards. The reason for that vessel is the selfie and social media promotion of it. But that's one specific type of park. The everyday park is more an extension of your family. So how that trends continue, we feel it's more important for people to have a voice in the design. So I've actually, just beginning in October, started a new software and a new technology called In Situ, with a C, that is augmented reality that lets you go and see a new project in your neighborhood and comment on it, but in your neighborhood at your own time. And I think that this technology is growing. I call it new glasses for Jane Jacobs. But the more people get involved with change, and that's why I asked you about change to begin with here. If you want change, you will change. It doesn't have to be at the scale of a Hudson Yards. It can be at the scale of a neighborhood park. But if you feel involved, not only in the use of your park, imagine if you felt involved in the creation of your park. Now we've taken that to the next level. And this is what transforms cities. I'm very excited.
I see. Go.
I think it's very important. I see a lot of women in the room. I don't see women here. An indicator of good
Only one will.
yeah, the moderator, but not the panelist. This morning I saw 2 sessions in the main room. 7 men in one, 7 men in the other, plus the UN Habitat executive, that they had to have a woman because it's a woman. We need more women. An indicator of good public places is where there's women. Women are an indicator because the women are more selective. If the public place is not clean and safe and feels nice, you're not going to have a lot of women. So having at least 50% women in the public spaces is an indicator of a good public place. Second message I want to mention is that in the cities we need not only the iconic big parks, multi-million-dollar parks, but also the small neighborhood parks, the ones that are within walking distance. Everybody must have parks and play areas within walking distance, so that it must be a network. And the third element that I want to make is sidewalks. I think there is nothing as important in a city as the sidewalk. The sidewalk is the most important piece of infrastructure. And actually, a symptom of a civilized city, of a developed city, is where you have magnificent sidewalks with trees and benches and good lights, and people come and stay. The sidewalks are almost a family member of the parks. The sidewalks have more in common with the parks than with the streets. On the street, if you are on a bicycle, in public transit, or on a car, you are going from point A to point B. Not on the sidewalk. On the sidewalk, you say, I'm going to go for coffee, and you take 2 hours. You go and sit and watch people and get coffee and sit and socialize. And unfortunately, on many emerging countries, few people have cars and they park them on the sidewalk because it's a symptom of power. I'm wealthy, I'm powerful, I can park on the sidewalk. Or they put barriers, or the retail comes out and puts signs and things on the sidewalk. So the sidewalks are magnificent. That's where we meet our boyfriends and girlfriends, and we meet the person that our neighbors, the people selling flowers and fruits and vegetables. So pay enormous attention. If you want to have a nice city center, make sure that the sidewalks work properly.
Thank you very much. Hope next year we will see more women in the panel.
You know, by the way, I made this comment to someone from the Moscow Urban Forum, and then she said, oh, but in a session of health, I saw more women than men in the panel. Well, maybe we need more men dealing with health and more women dealing with transportation. It doesn't make any sense that when you are talking about mobility, it's all men. When you are talking about social services, it's all women. No, men also need to be involved in social services. By the way, the 2 people that transformed New York the most in the last 10 years are 2 women. The Commissioner of Transportation, Janet Sari Khan, and the Commissioner of Planning, Amanda Burden. Of course, the mayor helped him out, Bloomberg, but without them, he didn't really know a lot about cities. These two women were the ones that actually led the projects. So I think that is something that we clearly need more of. And it's very emblematic. I was at a session yesterday in a panel where even the president of Tatarstan made a joke that he said, "Oh, they should come and visit my country because the food is good and the women are pretty." And then he was asking the moderator if the moderator said, "Oh, I like to eat that," and he asked, "What, the food or the women?" This is the president asking these kind of questions. So we really need to elevate the conversation.
Я надеюсь, что то, что сказал президент, было просто пришлось к слову.
I hope that the president's were just a joke, but I wanted to ask one question.
Don't joke with that. That's the problem.
С каждым годом таких шуток становится меньше, я думаю, на наших форумах.
With years, we have less amount of this kind of jokes in our forums, hopefully. But there is one question which is relevant for the social spaces here, especially for smaller ones you, Gil, specified. When we make them open for all, there are conflicts between different layers, different actors who want to have the same place. Did you face this kind of conflicts, and how you could manage to resolve it? Clearly, we can avoid them from the very beginning, but we're here. We can see two different kinds of citizens. They want to use the same space, and there are conflicts. How to use it? Who should be there? What would you recommend to do when we have the conflict already?
Your previous question is very linked through citizen engagement. We need to honestly listen to the citizens. When you do any project in the public place, I recommend 3 steps: the what, the how, and the when and where. Don't involve the architects in all of it. The what, first you need to know what do the citizens want, and listen, not only listen to one segment, because if you listen only to the people that play sports, they say, oh, we only want football fields. If you listen only to the children in the schools, they will say, no, we want this part of the school. No, listen to the business community around the park, listen to the people that do sports, the people that do passive recreation, the older people. Once you know the what do they want, then invite the architects and do the master plan. Say, this is what the citizens want. The citizens might say, I want to walk. But the citizens don't know if it should be around or it should be like spaghetti. It should be 2 meters, 4 meters, what material. The landscape architects are the ones that know. They are the creatives. And then the last part is the how. That is when you implement it, and that's part of it. But so I would say listening to as diverse an audience as possible, and to realize that change is hard. When you're going to change in Moscow or New York or anywhere, one, change is not unanimous. So listen to everyone, but change is not unanimous. 2, the general interest must prevail over the particular. And 3, when you say no to something, you're also saying yes to something else.
Thank you very much. Alexandros, we have only 1 minute, so please.
I would just say there's never enough room for everything, and someone has to choose. And your choice is an expression of your values. So at a certain point, you listen, you ask the architects, but in the end, you make a decision. And that hopefully is done with a view to the future and with a care for the people you're making the decision. But you can't, that's very important, you can never avoid that decision. It always comes.
And also try to also try to be flexible. It doesn't have to be that one field is only for football. No, it can be for football at certain times, and you can do aerobics at another times, and you can do yoga at another times. That's one of the wonderful things about many of the parks in New York, that some people during the daytime, the people that work around there then listen to music. At nighttime, the people that live there watch movies in the park. So it's different. There are different audiences in the daytime, at nighttime, in the weekday, in the weekends. So try to do flexible places in the public spaces.
Я хочу поблагодарить наших экспертов за эту бурную.
To thank our experts for this great discussion. And one thing I would like to attract our attention. I'm happy to assess we no longer discuss here just about how important it is to have public spaces, and the example brought about by Vitaly is great. This kind of great Soviet space is now an example how they heard the community of rollers in the park. And I would like to promote our audience to think how we can voice our right for the city, how we are trying to do that. Something depends on us, what we want to see in these public spaces. Then we'll probably have less conflicts. We are speaking so much. Thank you for your attention, for your time.